Okay, today we have a very special podcast episode. We're actually here at Guru Kitchen and Bar, downtown Edmonton. Big thanks to Gurji and the entire team for letting us shoot the podcast here. We have a beautiful setup that you're going to see very soon. But on top of that, we have a really unique guest. Actually, our first guest that is in the alcohol, beverage, wine industry in general, Gurvinder Bhatia. He's editor-in-chief of Quench magazine. He's a wine sommelier, Italian wine expert, entrepreneur, speaker, and so much more. So he's actually already here. He's currently looking at some wine. So let's go meet him. Let's get the introductions out the way, and let's pick a really cool bottle of wine that we can bring back to this table and have a few sips of. So let's go. Gurvinder, how you doing, my friend?
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. So,
You too.
as I just mentioned, I gave you a nice, I think a very nice introduction, Gurvinder Bhatia. So we're here. You know, we want to uncover today not only your story as a brown baller and your unique journey, but a lot of things and questions I have about wine, because I'm starting to get into it, and so is our audience. I think you are the perfect guest for us to uncover that. So if it's okay with you, we'll dive into this.
Absolutely.
This wine cellar, and let's pick your brain a little bit here on some things.
Sure,
How's that sound?
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm thinking Gurjit's okay if I go in here.
Yep. Yeah, this has been pre-approved by the staff. If not, I will take all responsibility.
Fantastic.
So what I'd like to ask you first, the question is, first of all, beautiful wine cellar. What's the first thing? I'm already overwhelmed. So if you're talking to someone like myself and I come into a wine cellar, I'm looking for a bottle of wine, what is it that you're looking at?
Well, you know, here's the thing. I mean, first of all, you know, with wine, I think it's so important that we recognize the fact that wine is an agricultural product, right? So wine should actually have a sense of place. Wine should tell the story about where it's from. And I'm a firm believer that both food and wine, because I consider wine to be food, and I'm a firm believer that food and wine get their context from people, place, culture, and history. So, you know, there's so much to learn about wine. It can be quite overwhelming, but that's also why I always encourage people to, you know, connect yourself with somebody in the industry, whether it be a great wine shop, whether it be a sommelier who works at a restaurant, somebody who's knowledgeable and who can kind of help demystify it, because
almost guide you through, right?
Exactly. Because, you know, as with anything, there's so many different styles, and there's so many different flavor profiles, and there's so many.
That's what I've learned in my small time drinking wine.
Exactly. So really, it's a journey. Right. Wine is really a journey, and it's a fun journey because, you know, what can be, you know,
so
there's nothing wrong with eating and drinking.
What type? Oh no, two of my favorite things. What type of journey are you trying to take us on during this podcast?
So basically, what I thought I'd do is I'll pick out a bottle that from a producer that I know quite well, and, you know, we'll talk a little bit about just what I said. You know, in terms of, let's put the wine in the context of the people and the place and the culture and the history.
Put it at the forefront. Yep.
Exactly. Perfect. Fantastic. So, I mean, Guru has some nice bottles, but what I'm thinking is, let's grab this.
Okay. So what have we picked out here?
So this is the Feudo Montoni Vrucara from Sicily. And this is a small producer in the center of the island of Sicily at elevation. And this particular bottle is made with an indigenous grape from Sicily called Nero d'Avola. But the interesting thing about this particular bottle is that the Vrucara vineyard itself is actually it's a pre-phylloxera vineyard. So phylloxera is essentially it's a disease that destroyed most of the vineyards in Europe and actually North America. And without getting too technical about it, this particular vineyard is still on its original rootstock.
Amazing.
And so because of its location and because of its isolation, many people think that this particular Nero d'Avola that grows here has its own special DNA because it hasn't really been affected by other outside environmental factors.
Right, so that would lend itself to potentially a unique taste.
Exactly.
A very unique flavor profile.
Exactly.
So as you can already tell, the wine knowledge, and he's only sharing maybe 1% of the wine knowledge. He's toning it down for us, but it's extraordinary. So why don't we take this bottle if you're happy with it?
I'm going to bring a couple other bottles just because.
Even better,
because. So,
and if we have time, we can try to finish all.
Absolutely. You know, phenomenal young producer from Emilia-Romagna in northeastern Italy who is considered to be one of the rising stars.
Okay.
So I'll bring that.
I'll hold on to this one then.
Absolutely, and I'm going to bring one more, just because there's so many great producers in Sicily. This is one of my favorites also, Gulfi.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, this one is from Sicily?
This is also from Sicily.
So we have 3 Italian wines, correct?
3 Italian.
Beautiful. And I know we're going to touch on this later, your expertise in the Italian wine sector. So why don't we take these back?
Absolutely. Fantastic.
We can uncork one of them and have some fun. Okay, G. Can I call you G?
Absolutely.
Gurvinder?
Is
that a nickname? It must be.
Most of my friends call me G.
Okay, perfect. So you picked out 3, amazing, what I think would be amazing bottles of wine. Now you have the hard question. Which one are you going to open?
I tell you what, it's usually the bottle that I open really kind of depends on my mood, right? Okay. Because there's no decrease in quality between it. And these all 3 of these are phenomenal bottles of wine. So I think let's do this one. Let's do the Chiara Candello.
And so now, based on that, what is the mood you're in?
Well, the mood is actually, it's a couple of things. One is that, Chiara is actually, she's actually recently received some phenomenal accolades in Italy. She was just named by Food and Wine Italy as the top winemaker under 35 years old.
Wow, okay.
Forbes Italy just named her top 40 under 40. She is one of the rising stars in Italy. And she's such a fantastic person as well, and she's so passionate about what she does because her family actually has been in the wine industry for many, many years. And a few years ago, she decided that she wanted to produce her own wine. And so within her family's vineyard, she's taken over a plot, and she is essentially creating her own wines. And she does her entry level, and it's all Sangiovese, which is the main grape that most people know from Tuscany, in Brunello and Chianti.
So say the grape name one more time.
Sangiovese.
Okay.
But in Emilia-Romagna, Sangiovese has a little bit of a different character. And Emilia-Romagna is a region that I think most people aren't familiar with the name Emilia-Romagna, but they should be familiar with so much that's from Emilia-Romagna, because Emilia-Romagna really is the heart of gastronomy in Italy. This is where prosciutto di Parma is from. This is where Parmigiano Reggiano cheese is from. This is where Lambrusco is from. This is where Luciano Pavarotti was born. So Federico Fellini. So it's really the heart of food and gastronomy and culture in Italy in so many different ways. And Chiara is based on the Romagna side. And this particular wine, Le Lucele, has been named on several occasions now as one of the top red wines in Italy. And her first vintage was only 2015.
Also, still very new.
Absolutely. And this one here is a 2016, so her second vintage of this particular wine. And for somebody who's so young, who's making such phenomenal wines, I love to support young people in the industry they're well-intentioned, they are so focused on quality, and part of what they do is they're making wine more accessible to the next generation.
Right.
Because I think for so long, wine was something that was really looked upon as something only for a certain demographic.
I totally agree.
Right? Only for a certain income level. First it only started to be for a certain demographic, and then it kind of became, for a certain income level. But really, wine really is something that I think, particularly over the last 25 years, has become a little bit more prevalent in mainstream society, regardless of income level, regardless of demographic, regardless of all these different factors. And there's so much great wine being produced around the world now that there's really no reason why anybody can't make wine a part of their everyday life,
right,
and have it be actually affordable.
Well, that's exciting. I'm very, after that description, I can't wait for us to dive into this And obviously, I know you're about to go and uncork it. So
Absolutely. And I should say though, I mean, this particular bottle is not necessarily an everyday price. So I mean, this is her top. This is her top wine. I mean, and so it is a little bit pricier, but her entry level, retails in the 35-ish range. So a little bit more accessible. But there are some phenomenal bottles out there for $20, $25.
Right. So you're basically just spoiling me today as the host, which I appreciate.
Exactly.
So as you're going into this and you are going to, I guess, uncork this bottle of wine. We talked about this prior. There's some myths. Does the bottle need to be tilted? What is the way in your mind to uncork it? And before I say that, to me, it's just like, hey, let's drink it. So is it the fastest way is the best, or is there a particular method?
Well, I mean, I think it depends whether if you're doing service in a restaurant versus whether you're sitting around with friends and opening up a bottle.
Right.
I mean, if you're sitting around with friends opening up a bottle, really the key is you don't want to break the cork. That's the main thing.
Simple.
Because as soon as you break the cork, I mean, then you have a whole other issue. So, I mean, the key really is to have a good corkscrew. And of course, I didn't bring my corkscrew today, so I grabbed one from the bar over here at Guru. But I mean, this is good because it has two levers, and that two levers on that corkscrew allows you to pull the cork straight out, which should help prevent the any type of breakage. Sometimes if you only have a single lever, sometimes you'll bend the cork enough that it'll actually break, which again you end up having to fish it out.
Beautiful. So this will be a master class on opening a bottle of wine presented by G. And as you do this, I have a question that popped up in my mind. And keep in mind, this is coming from someone who is, I love wine, but obviously the knowledge isn't there, and I'm sure most of our listeners won't know. So explain the major difference here between a grape that you're just gonna go to save on, you're gonna go to your grocery store and get, and the grapes that you're talking about, which I cannot pronounce properly, so I won't butcher it, that are in Italy and all these places, and they're making wine from it.
Sure. So I mean, there's well over 1,000 grape varieties used to make wine in the world.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that, first of all.
And so but in North America, we've pretty much, been conditioned predominantly to the visibility. What's traditionally been available has been the French grape varieties: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, which all originated in France. And historically in North America, I mean, French wines were the first wines that really kind of entered the market and people became familiar with. And people always looked at French wines as kind of the top quality, and Bordeaux, Burgundy, Champagne. These are all wines that people are familiar with, even if they don't necessarily maybe drink on a regular basis. But what's happened again over the last 25, 30 years is that the quality of wine being produced around the world has increased and elevated. And so we also are starting to see more and more wines from other countries enter the market here in Canada, because it used to be really, we used to see a lot of French wines, we used to see some Italian wine, we used to see, vintage port from Portugal, and we used to see some California wines, and really not too much else, about 30 years ago. Now we're seeing wines from everywhere. And all these countries, Italy alone has over 600 grape varieties that have been identified that are used to produce wine. I mean, Portugal has over 300 grape varieties that are used to produce wine. So we're seeing more and more of these wines from these countries enter the market, but also in these countries, there has been a resurgence in terms of producing wine with these indigenous grape varieties, because for I think a number of reasons. I think one is that these varieties help to give the place its identity. So in Italy, for example, Italy is 20 regions within a country.
Right.
But really, if you look back, people think of Italy as an old country, but really it's actually not. It's actually a young country, because Italy was only unified in the 1860s. So in Italy, even when you go region to region, particularly the older generation, they identify first with their town, then they identify with their region,
Right.
and then they identify with the country.
Okay.
So, and historically, each region has its own grape varieties. It has its own cuisine. It has its own dialect.
Absolutely.
It has its own culture. And so when you go, for example, if you're in the Veneto in Northeast Italy, where Verona and Venice are located, I mean, the grapes that are grown there, Corvina, Rondinella, Molinara, are different than if you go, to Piedmont in Northwest Italy, where, the main grapes are Nebbiolo and Dolcetto and Barbera. And so each region is very different. So what's happening is that by producing wines that from the grape varieties that are native to those particular areas, you're actually giving identity.
Yeah, to that region, exactly.
Exactly. And people are feeling, from an economic standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, it really lends itself to that whole idea that, wine is an agricultural product, and it should have a sense of place, and it should tell a story about where it's from. And so we're starting to see this more and more, and this whole idea of wine being an agricultural product, I think in North America, we're just starting to understand that, because, for particularly, I think over the last 20 years, the general public has been conditioned that, these cool wines, they're only for people who know something about wine. For all the rest of you, here, we're making this, this mass-produced sugar-laden swill.
$5 wines.
Exactly. And that's actually doing a disservice, not just to the general public. It's also doing disservice to the industry as a whole. Because what we should be doing is saying, hey, there's some fantastic quality, inexpensive wines from Portugal, from Spain, from Italy, from all these countries in the world. You don't have to spend a lot of money to drink well. And if you don't have a big budget, it doesn't mean you have to drink shit. And this is the message that should have been started when wine started to become more prevalent in mainstream society, as opposed to what our industry did. And every issue in our industry has been created by our industry, right? So I never blame the consumer for this. So instead of, when wine was becoming a little bit more mainstream in society, instead of our industry saying, hey, fantastic, people, just the general public is more interested in wine, great, this is a great opportunity to introduce them to all these cool different grape varieties around the world, all these great wines that
new flavors, exactly.
From and that are really affordable as well.
Yeah. No, I love it. So obviously all this wine talk is getting me excited. So I'd love for us to try this, and I'll let you obviously pour the glasses.
Absolutely.
And if it's okay with you, or you're excited about this, what I'd like to do is kind of dive into a little bit more rapid fire questions where, I would love to pick your brain about wine more.
Absolutely.
And I will challenge you to answer obviously as quickly as you can, whatever pops to your mind, so it's natural, and condensed, so that the other listeners will be like, hey, this makes sense. I get it. And the first question I have for you is, there's so many different types of wine. You just named, I'm going to butcher this, but Cab Sauv, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, and then there's rosés and there's other things. What would be like the top 5 wines or types of wines?
Depends. It just depends, right? Because
what do you think would be the most popular? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it.
See, most popular is probably, again, those varieties that people are familiar with, like Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. Those are probably the most popular. But it's really important to recognize that there's great wine produced everywhere, right? And so, for me, my favorite grape variety is actually Nebbiolo. Which is the grape used to make Barolo and Barbaresco.
Barolo's the one I've had. That's a great wine.
Exactly. So so it really just depends.
Fair enough. So now you poured a nice little glass of wine here. So walk us through, obviously, as you get a glass of wine, what's not the etiquette, but what's the best way to like open it up or let it breathe? What are the tips and tricks?
Yeah, and again, without from a practical standpoint, wine is cooped up in this bottle. It needs air in order to express itself. So, when you see somebody swirling a glass, it's not, it shouldn't be just to be pretentious. I mean, it's actually serving a purpose.
That's only people with the pinky up in the air, I think, that
Exactly.
it becomes pretentious.
So it's actually serving a purpose because it's actually allowing that wine to oxygenate and release its aromas and flavors. And for a wine like this one, the Lucciole, which is a big structured bottle of wine, it needs that air in order to start to release itself. And then basically, I always tell people, there's a difference between tasting wine, drinking wine. I'm a big believer in drinking wine, right? But I'm also a big believer in maximizing your experience when you're drinking wine. And so, part of that is
the smell.
Absolutely. The aroma, because our nose can actually recognize many, many, many more character than our palate can. And so this is going to be your first indication in terms of, okay, what's this wine actually going to be like, right?
And some other things, I don't know if these are myths or just things I've heard or seen, is two things. The teardrops around the glass, I've heard that matters.
Bullshit.
Okay, so great. So first thing debunked.
And so the legs.
Yes.
The legs. So all the legs actually it shows you nothing about the quality of a wine.
Okay.
It just shows you basically the rate at which alcohol is evaporating.
Okay, so debunked. First thing. This is great. Yeah. This should have been called Mythbusters. So now, what about the clarity of the wine? Because I've heard some things there. Is that something you look at, or
you can? And again, I mean, it depends, because there's some wines that are actually unfined and unfiltered before they're put in the bottle, because some winemakers believe that by filtering a wine, you remove some of the flavor and some of the character. So, So if a wine has sediment, it doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of the quality of that wine. It just is and as wine ages, it may also throw a little bit of sediment. So you can have sediment in wines. You might get crystals on the cork. None of that means that there's anything wrong with the wine necessarily.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, another question for you is, what is the main differentiator between white wine and red wine?
Color.
Main thing. The type of grape and color?
Well, type of grape, sure. But I mean, here's the thing. So with red wine, the color comes from the pigment is in the skins.
The skins of the grapes.
In the skins of the grapes, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So the color comes from keeping the juice in contact with the skins. So can you make a white wine from red grapes? The answer is yes. If you don't have any contact with the skins.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, champagne, for example, I mean, you can have, champagne, because the grapes used to make champagne are Chardonnay, which is a white grape, and then Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, which are both red grapes. And so you can actually have a white champagne that has red grapes. Is made using
Makes
red
sense.
grapes. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now, if you were, and this may be tough because obviously there's not food in front of us, but also, you go to certain restaurants, you'll hear like, hey, this pairs well with a steak, or this is with a chicken. Is there a simple way to explain that to the viewers? Like, if you're having a nice piece of steak, is there a type of wine you should look for to pair?
Again, I think we agonize a little too much about trying to find perfect pairings.
Okay.
If you have a well-balanced wine, and if you have well-prepared food, a lot of it's just going to go naturally, right?
Yeah, for success.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so, I mean, are there basic guidelines? Sure. I mean, I'm a big believer that there's no rules when it comes to food and wine pairing, because some of the best pairings are found by actually going outside this the traditional rules, right?
Yes.
Because we also have to understand that these traditional rules of food and wine pairing, red wine with red meat, white wine with white meat, I mean, that was, created by some old white dude in England,
Long time ago.
who eats meat and potatoes and has never been exposed to any other type of food that has any type of flavor to it, right? And so when it comes to actual food and wine pairing, I'm a huge believer in experimentation. As a starting point, because, it's always helpful to have a starting point. If you have, if you make a list of food and you have a list of wines, list them from lightest to heaviest. on both sides,
Okay.
and chances
you
are
go.
that they're gonna
They can
match
intersect
up.
there and match up. Yeah, that makes
Exactly.
sense.
That's a starting point. But again, today's style of cooking is so different than what it used to be, because we have so many different flavor profiles intermingling with each other. We have so much, and I don't like to use the word fusion cuisine, because I think that word has been bastardized too much. But I mean, there's so many types of cuisines that are influenced by many different types of cultures. And so you have all these different flavors on the plate that traditionally weren't on the plate when people started talking about this traditional food and wine pairing. So really, for me, it's about experimentation. And this is where, if you go to a restaurant and they have a tasting menu where they'll pair wines with each course,
Yeah.
great, try it, right? Because that's how you learn. But even more so, if you're at a party where there's a bunch of different dishes, appetizers, whatever, and there's like 6 or 7 bottles of wine that are open, try them with
Have
the different
fun, experiment.
Exactly.
I like that mindset around it.
Absolutely. I mean, when I'm judging at a wine competition and the judges go out for dinner at night, we don't have one bottle of wine on the table with our dinner. We have 30 bottles of wine open on the table, and we are just trying different things with different things.
I'd like to be invited to these parties if possible. That sounds great. So I have another question for you. This may not be any correlation or not a real thing, but you can always say, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Now, in terms of wine, if I tell you I have a favorite bottle of wine, does that say something particular about a person? Like, are you able to say, and what I mean by that is the flavor profiles and what you may tend to like, or the certain regions. Is that something you found? Like, if I tell you I love Austin Hope, that's one of our bottles we've had a lot of. Does that say anything?
Sure. I mean, basically, when I had my shop, so for 20 years I owned a wine shop. When people would come in order to start to figure out the starting point of, okay, where do we go in terms of, because when somebody can come in and say, do you have a recommendation? Lots of recommendations, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be something that you're going to like, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So by somebody saying the type of wine that they like, somebody who knows wine should know, okay, this is the style that they like.
So you can find that flavor, or you match it up somehow.
Exactly. And then you can help kind of progress out from there, right? Because particularly for people who are, I think, starting to drink wine, you don't want to scare them. So if they like a particular style and you go, oh, hey, this bottle over here is really good too, but if the style is completely different from what they normally drink, their palate is going to taste it. It's going to be, oh my God, this is different. And the first indicator,
probably bad.
Exactly, right? And so what you want to do is you want to try to slowly guide somebody so that you expand their palate gradually. And by doing that, you broaden their horizons without scaring them. And ultimately, that's what you want, right? Do you want people to be open-minded, to taste a whole bunch of different things?
No, I like that. So natural wines. All these questions are popping up in my head, by the way. It's like, there's been I've seen a lot of things coming up with natural wines. I have 2 questions for you. And before we talk about natural wines, is what actually is in bottle of wines? Is it for most part pure grapes? Is there other additives, preservatives, sugars? So obviously it's case by case as well.
Yeah. So I mean, in the simplest sense, I mean, you have the sugar from the grapes, right?
So natural sugars,
sugar from the grapes, and yeast.
Yeast, okay.
And that gives you alcohol and carbon dioxide. Right. Simple. And that's the simplest way to, So, but each grape variety has a different character. So the character of that grape variety is what gets translated into the wine. And then, and beyond that, there's so many different factors that I mean, it's infinite. Yeah.
So just building on that, which that makes sense. Great explanation. I feel like I'm seeing an uptrend in this natural wine industry. Now, obviously, by the smile, I could tell you are too. Is this a movement that makes sense? Is this something that's you're going to see a big shift in, or you're on the opposite side right now?
So here's the thing. I mean, first of all, I mean, natural wine really refers to wines that are produced with minimal intervention, right? So the idea is that you are uh, you are you have minimal intervention in the vineyard, and most natural wine producers are producing organically, or that's kind of the idea behind it. You're producing
Right.
organically, sustainably, and then you are uh, manipulating as little as possible in order to translate what went on in the vineyard into the bottle. Into the bottle. Okay. So, number one, that's not new. Okay. That's something that's been around forever. This natural wine movement, there's an issue in the sense that there's a lot of faulty wines out there that are being passed off as natural. And so, and part of the issue is that there's really no definition of what a natural wine is.
Right.
Okay. So, within this category, and again, I'm using this category, this relatively loosely. Part of the issue with this natural wine movement, but I mean, I'm a huge believer in reflecting in the bottle what goes on in the vineyard. I'm a huge believer
in direct correlation there.
Exactly. Because I said, I mean, wine is an agricultural product. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you should be able to, viticulture is 90% of what goes in here. And I believe that the wine shouldn't be manipulated to the point where it eliminates any sense of the place,
where
the grape variety, everything else. Exactly, right? So, but part of the issue with the natural wine movement is that, and it's starting to change, but part of the issue is that those that are promoting natural wine, some of those that are promoting natural wine, are not making the distinction between the different levels of quality in that category. Because every single category of wine, there's good and there's bad.
Of course.
Right?
Just with everything.
It doesn't matter whether it's Cabernet Sauvignon, whether it's wines from Italy, it doesn't matter whether it's Canadian. There's always good and bad because quality is always dictated by the producer. So some that are promoting natural wine blindly are promoting actually a lot of wines that are faulty and not making the distinction between what is actually good quality and not good quality within that category. This is starting to change a little bit. And you see it mostly changing in markets, in the bigger markets like New York,
I feel like
and
USA,
Chicago.
North America.
In a market like Edmonton, for example, I mean, part of the issue in a market here is that you have, because the wine culture in the industry is still evolving. And so you have the industry not making that distinction. You have wine bars opening up that are only serving natural wine, of which some are faulty. And the younger generation that is going to these bars who want to learn to drink wine are drinking wines and thinking, okay, I'm supposed to like this because the cool kid is opened up the wine bar and saying this is what I should drink. But in effect, some of these wines are actually faulty. And so in order to actually, I think, perpetuate a vibrant wine culture and get the next generation involved, we need to ensure that our industry is educated in a way that is not to make wine special, but is able to guide people into saying what is good quality and what maybe isn't good quality. And quality, I'm talking about in a subjective way, not an objective way, not a subjective way. Subjectively, we like it, we don't like it. There's lots of wines out there. There's good wines out there that you might not like just because it's not to your taste. But objectively, there's a difference between something that's well made and something that's faulty.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you're an Italian wine expert. Well, there's many things, right? Can we just touch on that briefly? And you also seem like very well educated on Italy, the region, the cities, which obviously makes a lot of sense. So can you just touch on that a little bit? How did that come about? Like why and why specifically Italy?
It wasn't intentional. I think after, I mean, my focus was always on great small producers from around the world.
Okay.
And it still is. I love, great wines from anywhere in the world. Um, uh, but I think it was probably 3 or 4 years after I'd opened my shop. So, kind of in the late '90s, that customers were in the store and said, "Oh, you're an Italian specialist," and I never actually thought about it. And they said, because you carry like Italian wines that nobody else has, and
Interesting.
I think it was just something that, for whatever reason, was developing organically in the
Yeah.
shop based on the wines I was tasting and what I wanted to bring in. And uh, after that, it became a little bit more of a conscious effort, in the sense that, I mean, I love the culture in Italy. I love the culture around food and wine. I love the historical aspect of it, and so I feel very comfortable in Italy. And I actually find a lot of similarities between Italian culture and Indian culture. Quite honestly, I
Yeah.
mean, how the family unit, how people put so much
Very
emphasis
family
on.
oriented there.
Absolutely, but even things like some of the superstitions and all.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of similarities
That's
between
interesting. Even how you were saying
obsession
earlier.
with digestion. I mean, it's
Oh wow! Even earlier, when you're talking about like different regions, different dialects, and what they're known for, like I immediately thought India. It's so similar in that
It
you
is
know
very
what you're going
similar.
when you go to a specific city.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
that's quite amazing. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be an Italian, just a wine expert, Italian wine? What does that mean, and how did you get that title or that role?
So, I mean, I've been going to Italy for 22, 23 years, and often 6, 8, 10 times a year.
Okay.
And so, uh, part of, and 25 years ago, Italian wines, other than Barolo, maybe a little bit of Brunello, maybe a little Amarone, really weren't that
Love
popular.
Amarone. Yeah.
They weren't that popular here, right? I mean, and so I think being one of the first to really um, delve deep into Italy in this market, um, was something that people often found Italy confusing because there's so many different grape varieties, there's so many different regions. I actually found it not confusing. For whatever reason, it just kind of all clicked with me.
Yeah, it came together.
And also the flavor profile of the wines I quite enjoyed. And so uh, every time I went to Italy, I would be a sponge and I would just soak up more and more
Yeah.
and talk to the winemakers and visit the vineyards. And it just so happened that I think it was 2000, and so I became known as an Italian specialist. But in 2015, Vinitaly, which is the world's largest wine show that's run in Verona every year, predominantly Italian wine, and they started a certification program.
Okay.
And the individual who was running that program I'd met a few years earlier, and he said to me, he goes, "You should take this program." And it was a 1 week course and then there was an exam afterwards. And I said, "No," I said, I don't
not
have
for
time
you.
I don't have time to do this. And I never took any formal wine education. I never did the WSET or any of that kind of stuff. And he said, "No," he goes, "You really should do it. It'll be different." He goes, "You should do this." And so I did, and it was an intensive course. I mean, it involved everything from the history to genetics to, I mean, it was just
Of the
a
different
deep
wines.
dive
Yeah.
into Italian wine and the regionality and the grape varieties and agriculture and like I said, everything. And so this program started in 2015, and it's been running every year, multiple times a year now in many different parts of the world. And so there's been, with the exam and the tastings afterwards, I mean, so there's a number of people who've been certified as Italian wine ambassadors, but there's only 16 people who have taken this course and this exam over the last 7 years that have been certified as Italian wine expert.
And you're one of those.
And I'm yes.
Well,
I'm
congratulations. So
Thank
I
you.
mean, a little cheers to that.
Cheers.
So that's beautiful. So with the vineyards, there's one, and obviously we're on the Brown Bullish podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but gotta touch on Mother India a little bit here. So there's one that I noticed and I've heard about multiple times even when I traveled there. It was brought up. I believe it's called Sula Vineyards. Are you familiar at all with that? And what would be, like, I guess if it's possible, a quick comparison for everyone, like an Italian wine in that region versus an Indian wine in those regions? Like, is it just a stark difference?
It's night and day. It's night and day.
Okay.
So back in probably about 12 years ago, I was in India, and I was asked to do a seminar for the Calcutta Wine Club.
Oh, okay.
And very interesting because there were so many people who were so interested in wine. I mean, wine is becoming so popular in India. And there's a difference between, Indian wine and developing a wine culture in India. So Indian wine is at the infancy of its evolution. So it is going to take time for the quality to
develop. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but where India is really going to develop its wine culture is by having more international wines available and have the wine consumers drinking and learning more about wine in general.
I understand the flavors, the taste, what they want.
Exactly.
Okay.
But that is also going to help drive the quality evolution for the Indian wine industry, because it's not that different than the Canadian wine industry in many ways, right? So, you can't judge yourself just by your neighbor in an emerging wine region, right? So Canada is now producing some phenomenal quality wines comparable with the best in the world. But 30 years ago, there weren't.
It took a lot of time.
It took time to do that, right? But part of what helped that evolution was the comparisons, but also the experience of the winemakers, the consumers drinking great quality wine from everywhere else, so that there was some benchmarks in terms of quality. So in India, it's the same thing. Consumers have to be drinking great quality wine. Once they understand great quality wine, they're going to push the Indian wine industry to make better quality wine.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that just takes time.
Yeah. And that just makes sense how you explained it, to try new things, to understand different flavors, and then develop the wine within the country. So that's great. We're about to go into this here, which I'm excited to explain to everyone and kind of dive further in. But before we get there, you were a lawyer before this, correct?
Yes.
You may still be practicing, you may not, but I would assume that you perhaps are not practicing anymore. And the question I have is, from a lawyer to, I would say just a wine expert, how did that happen?
Well, I mean, so when I was practicing, so I was I went to law school in the States, got admitted to the Illinois bar, thinking that I was going to go back to Chicago and work in Chicago. But I thought, okay, I'll come back to Alberta. I'll article here for a year, get admitted to the Alberta bar, and maybe whether it's cross-border stuff or whatever the case, or at some point if I wanted to come back, And I came back and I ended up just getting comfortable and staying.
Staying, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens in Edmonton.
I know.
You've noticed
I know. And so, in '93, the Alberta government privatized the retail and the importation of alcohol.
In 93, okay.
In 1993, yeah.
And you opened your shop soon after?
In 95.
Okay.
And so the thought was that, okay, yeah, I never actually thought that I wanted to open up a wine store. I mean, until this all kind of happened. And but I did know that I was probably the only person on the first day of law school that knew that I wasn't going to practice law for the rest of my life, that law was going to help me in business. And so got the license to open up a shop, waited to see what was going to happen. And the idea was that, okay, let's create a shop that has the boutique selection, but is accessible for anybody. We didn't want that pretension and that intimidation factor.
Open to anyone.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I always like to eat and drink. And so,
as I said, man, you're speaking to the choir, you're preaching to the choir. It's two of my favorite things. So with the shop, do you still have the shop?
No. So I had the shop from 1995 to 2016. So after 20 years, shut the shop down. Wow. I was so busy with judging internationally. And I mean, while I had the shop, I got a call from CBC Radio. And so I was their wine columnist for 11 years, every Thursday morning. And for the last 12 years, I've been the wine columnist at Global TV here.
And just for context, that means you're giving wine suggestions
weekly, it was basically, so the idea was, when I got this call it was 1999, and CBC Radio at Edmonton phone and said, "Hey, we're looking for a wine columnist. Can you do this?" And I went, "Of course I can do this." And so but I approached it the same way that I approached the shop, understanding that, I mean, I didn't come from a wine background, right? When I opened the shop, the idea was that everything about the shop was created in a way that, how do I want, if I was the customer coming into the shop, how do I want to be treated? How is the shop going to be set up?
Good approach. Yeah.
But also part of that was, how do we talk to people about wine? Because the average person doesn't care about the technical.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But also understanding, I didn't come from a wine background. So I always believed that food and wine get their context from people, place, culture, and history.
Yeah.
And so the idea was, I went on the radio and I told stories. I told stories about, who's making this wine, where it's from, the historical context of it, and help people relate to, because food and wine in a vacuum really is, you eat it, you drink it, you like it, you don't like it. Yeah. It really doesn't tell you much. But when you put it in a context
exactly
that people can relate to,
yep.
That's when people also start to engage with it. And so this is what I ended up doing on the radio. And it also, being radio, you have to tell a story, right? Because people can't see it. So you have to tell a story. And so it became a very popular column. And I think probably the greatest compliment I ever received from somebody was, I was in the airport and somebody stopped me and said, "We really enjoy your column on the radio." I said, "Well, thanks very much." And they said, "We don't drink." And I looked at them.
There you go.
And they said, "But you make us want to taste it." And that was one of the best compliments I've ever had, because it was something
it's a massive compliment. Man.
Exactly. So, and this is what I always try to do with wine is I want people to relate to it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I love how you explain that the relatability makes everything so different. And there's times I feel like you could have no idea what's in this bottle, or you maybe dislike it. But if you tell me the origin story, where it's from, the grape, something flicks in my mind, and I'm going to enjoy this meal so much more because of how you told that. So I also want to say too, I feel like, spoken like a true entrepreneur, just like myself and many others, we learn everything in the field. We learn everything daily. and not everything is being taught in schools or books, and we become experts through our teachings and learning. So kudos to you for that.
Cheers.
Let's switch gears a little bit into these beautiful magazines that we have on the table here. So we have Quench magazine, which you're editor in chief. I'd love for you to first of all explain what is Quench magazine.
Sure. I mean, so Quench actually is the longest running wine and food magazine in North America. Started in 1973.
Wow.
I've written for the magazine for about 22 years. I was the contributing editor since I think 2006 or 8 or something. I was the wine editor from 2014, and effective January 1st, 2021, I became the editor-in-chief and the publisher because I was crazy enough to buy it.
Cheers to that. So editor-in-chief, publisher, and owner.
Exactly. And honestly, the idea was that, and the previous owner was fantastic. He supported this magazine through ups and downs and everything else.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, in I believe it was May in 2020, I received a phone call from our previous editor who said, "We're out of print." And I said, "What do you mean we're out of print?" So the printing press in Montreal, where the magazine had been printed for such a long time, got shut down for not being an essential service.
Oh, wow.
And so and he said, he goes, "I don't know how long this is going to last." That fall, the owner at the time basically said that he was ready to sell. And I think, we all know what would have happened if he had sold it to a big media company. I mean, they love the idea of a niche publication.
It would have been torn apart, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Over 2 or 3 years, they phase it out because they realize it's not the profit center that they're hoping for.
Exactly.
Right. And so, honestly, I didn't want to see the magazine fade away. I mean, we'd put a lot of work into it, and we were actually looking at what's the next evolution for this magazine. And so, I crazily enough agreed to buy it. But my first thought was, do we go back into print? Because print is bloody expensive.
Yes.
But I still believe in print. And so I thought, okay, yes, we are going to go back into print. But it was also, we're going to reimagine this magazine. We're going to redesign this magazine. We're going to make this magazine a much truer reflection of the world in which we live. And so being that we were already out of print was actually, in some ways,
almost
I think,
a blessing, it seems like.
Yeah, it was a blessing because there was a little less pressure to in terms of a timeline. We were able to set our own timeline in terms of, okay, let's take 6 months to do this.
Yeah, redefine this, build it back up.
And then do this relaunch. And what we did is, I mean, we changed the bind. It's perfect binding now. It used to be saddle stitch. I mean, we increased the quality of the paper. I mean, we've gone to uncoated stock, a heavier stock. It's thicker, but more importantly, we've expanded the voices for food and wine. We've expanded the representation for food and wine. We're making sure that we're telling the stories that need to be told the way they should be told by the people who should be telling them.
Yeah.
And we have writers based around the world. I mean, we have writers based throughout Canada and the US and India and Italy and the UK and France and Sweden, because the idea is that we want to actually tell these stories in a way that represents what's actually happening in the world.
Absolutely.
And we don't want to change the narrative. I think that's part of it. A lot of publications will try to control the narrative of a story of a particular chef or a particular, and we want the voices.
You want the true natural story to be told, not something that's been scripted or changed up to match, whatever the publisher wants.
Exactly. And some people have said, oh, this is a diversity publication. And it really quite annoys me because we're not a diversity publication. We are simply representing the world in which we live.
Yeah. Which is diverse.
Exactly. It's about inclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
One of the main things I first saw and I told you this before we started, was the cleanliness of the brand. Particularly obviously this one and this one, like just very unique. And then as you pointed it out and you talked about the paper stock and the quality of it and the binding, like those are the details that matter, especially when you see something maybe at a bookstore or magazine shop, or you want these things to pop off. So kudos to you guys and the team for that side and the branding, which I think is amazing. With the magazine itself, a little bit of the business side here, for whatever you can share, feel free, whatever you can, no problem. The business side of owning a magazine, I'm just curious about it.
It's a money pit.
Okay, so there you go. So that has answered probably all the questions here, and I love the honesty. Is the main revenue driver, like the ads that are coming in, and because I assume the stories and everything you're doing, you're putting the money to go tell those stories and get the pictures and pay the writers.
Absolutely. So I'm a writer. So I make sure that we pay our writers, right?
Yeah.
So and editorial cost is our biggest expense. The traditional revenue model for a magazine is advertising and subscriptions. So advertising has been interesting because as much as the wine industry, food industry, corporate America in general love to talk about supporting businesses that are broadening the audience.
Right.
It's still about optics and a lot of bullshit. So,
Yep.
I mean, we don't get a lot of traditional advertising because those advertising dollars are still going into the traditional publications. So what we're trying to do, I mean, is not me having to dump money in this every month, but I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that revenue model a little bit.
Mhm.
So is advertising important? Yes, but I also will not blur the lines between advertising and editorial, which most magazines
They
do.
will easily do that because it's money.
Exactly. And I've made it, I had that same policy in my store. I never carried any product in my store that I didn't believe in. And I had a lot of the larger companies coming to me all the time saying, hey, would you put this on your shelf? We'll give you extra. I'm like, no, crappy product, I don't want it. And similarly, I have, advertisers coming to me and saying, hey, can you put this, in the magazine?
Right.
And I'm like, well, it'll say sponsored content. They go, well, the other magazines do. I'm like, I don't care what the other magazines do. I mean, I will not blur those lines for our readers. I mean, so we have lost, potential advertising because of that.
I commend you for staying true to what you believe in, though.
Well,
it's a big part of the magazine.
I'm too old to change who I am, right? I mean, so I'm not going to compromise what I believe in, right?
Right.
And so we're hoping that enough people will start to recognize and appreciate the value of what it is that we're doing, and that we will get, more people coming to the table. Great, fantastic. But we're also, trying to, we're getting the magazine. There's been some groups who have included the magazine with their wine club subscriptions, for example. We have
That makes sense.
some events that we're getting more involved with that are helping to change that. I mean, we have the ability. I mean, we have the ability. I mean, I've done thousands and thousands of events over the years, and we have that ability to draw on that in terms of giving people an experience. And I think that's actually the future in terms of the revenue model. Because quite honestly, advertising is a soul-sucking experience, and I hate it. And so the more we can go away from reliance on that,
Yeah.
the happier I'll be.
Yeah, all I can say is I agree that you cannot build a business that's reliant on advertising because
No.
like you just won't win.
Exactly.
Or you will win and your soul will be taken away,
Exactly.
which is what you don't want, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's great. So with the magazine, I had a couple more questions. Now, I'm curious on this digital versus in hand, right? The paperback or the actual in person. You find that people still are leaning towards the paper physical copy. And is there a digital copy also available?
We have a very strong digital presence.
Okay.
We our website has kind of mirrored the evolution of the print. But we also have everything on the website isn't just a replica of what's in the magazine. So we have fresh new articles that are on the website. We also have a weekly newsletter that goes out.
Email blast. Okay, beautiful.
Exactly. And each week, one of our writers will write the lead for that. And so we have a rotating group of writers who do that. And so to me, it really does go hand in hand. As much as people think print is dead, it's not. There's still a very strong love of print. And so long as we can afford to do print, we'll do print.
So do print, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say this from experience too, because I used to have, whatever, iPad, Amazon Kindle, and I love to read books. And I stopped using it because I just realized, man, there's nothing like going to pick out a book and the feel of turning the page and even the smell and just some of those senses you'll never get from the technology. So I totally agree with you there, which is great. And like you said, so with the digital side and even the imprint, the main revenue driver for you is the monthly subscriptions, right? That's
right now so on our website, there's no paywall on our website. Our website is free.
So this is free to access on the website.
Or
the articles and everything else is free.
Each issue will go online after the next print issue is released.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. So that makes sense. So the people who are paying are getting it, and
exactly
it gets put out afterwards.
Exactly.
So my background, my experience is content heavy. Documentaries, social media, videos, everything is content is king, and you visually, especially our generation, you know this better than kids, and everyone wants to be on TikTok and they want to consume media. And I noticed you guys had a YouTube channel. You have a great Instagram presence, great following. I saw you guys are making some great content past as well, and this was potentially with the past owner. Are you interested in the resurgence of the video side to capture more people and bring them into the Quench world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always been. I've done actually video for a number of years.
Okay.
I did when I was the wine columnist for the Edmonton Journal for a few years. I started to do videos back then. This is like 10 years ago, and it's time consuming. I mean, but
it is.
It is, but there's I think a lot of interesting application for video.
Yeah.
And we're going to do more of it. Quite honestly, I mean, the last 2 years basically has been spent with the redesign of print.
I could tell, and it's paid off. Yeah, hopefully.
And also, I learned more about paper in those 2 years than I ever thought I'd ever know. So a lot of time in that, particularly that first year, was really devoted to let's get this thing back out and get this thing relaunched.
Right.
Then the next step was to fix the website because I inherited a website that had a lot of bugs in it, and it's not my forte. So finding somebody to do that exactly. So that was the next project. The next project really is to make this sustainable.
Yeah.
And part of that is to incorporate more things like the video. I mean, we actually have quite a bit of content that we are over the next while we'll start to get up there. But over the next couple of years, I think we'll see a lot more video content.
There you go. I love that's music to my ears now. Tying wine with video because I'll be tuned in as an avid fan. What about the official? Will there be an official Quench podcast, video podcast. Is that going to be something on the roadmap potentially?
I think so. I mean, it's been something that's on my list of things to do.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I mean, I'm traveling 6-7 months out of the year. I also have great relationships with, winemakers and winery owners and chefs, and so I've had this brought up to me on numerous occasions that it needs to be done. Right, it needs to be done, and so I think number one, I never want to implement something unless we've got it, all the ducks are in a row and we're doing it well.
You know the plan, exactly.
Exactly. So that's one aspect of it. And I think after these past 2 years have been so insanely busy, I think next year we can actually start to look at kind of putting this thing on
almost like
paper
a phase 3, like you said. This is ready, website's right now. It's okay. What else are we, like you said, to make it a sustainable business where hopefully your pockets aren't going to break.
Exactly.
But as an entrepreneur, I commend you on doing this. It's exciting. So this is the Brown Ballers podcast, and obviously you, to me, it very much epitomize what a brown baller is. But I have a question to you, and I ask the same question to every guest: is to you, what does those two words brown baller mean?
I think it's something that it's being proud of not just who you are and what you've accomplished, but also from where you came. And I think that's so important because I mean, I'm a third culture kid, right? I mean, my parents immigrated to Canada from India in 1964. I was born in Canada, right? Yep. So I grew up with, Indian culture and Canadian culture. And when you're young, sometimes you have a hard time trying to figure out where you actually fit, right? And so
we've all experienced that. Yep.
And so it becomes I think when you're young, you try to fit in with all your friends. You don't want to be different. You don't want to be looked at as different.
You want to be the same, especially because your skin color is a little different.
Exactly. And, it's all, and I grew up wearing a turban too. Right. So,
oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that adds a whole new layer.
That adds a whole different dimension to it. Right. But as you get older, I think you start to embrace your own, roots and your culture more. Yeah. And it's not to say that, often I think people say, oh, you're not Indian enough, or, or you're, of course, or you're not Canadian. There's always something. Yeah. You're not Canadian. You're not in, and really, I think we forget that in this world we live in, this is a country of immigrants. And so
all around us,
it comes to a point where it's okay for people to blend these different cultures, because this is my experience is not just Indian culture and not just growing up in Canada. It is a combination. And so my experience is very different than anybody else's. And so I think it's so important to recognize that we can have our roots, and we can be proudly who we are. But I think that's something that comes when you're a little bit older, where you start to get really comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And this is something I just talked about recently, is same experience as you, being younger, just not comfortable in the skin, and all my friends, nobody was brown. So I want to be like them. And then as you get older, I'm so proud to celebrate the culture and learn the language, speak the language, the music, the food, like everything. And it's with social media now, of course, you can post everything. Exactly. So you see me and some of my friends now, we're sharing so much more, as opposed to 5-10 years ago. Like, that's not a normal thing.
Exactly.
It was still so sheltered. So I love that you said that. Have a similar story there. So this is almost a final question here, but what is next for Gurvinder? Is the focus here? You're traveling, you said 6 months more out of the year. Is there anything else on the horizon for you that you are going to be focusing on in 2023?
Well, the magazine is a big part of that. It needs
some love. It needs some.
It needs some love and attention.
It needs you there.
And we see these small little things that happen that keep me going. And so it's getting some phenomenal. It's getting great feedback globally, which is number one,
that's huge,
a great thing. And so I'm hoping that next year, which is also the 50th anniversary of the magazine, is next year.
That's a massive milestone year.
Exactly. So we're working on a few things that I'm hoping come about, and if they do come about, I'm hoping it's going to give the magazine a nice little boost. Yeah, absolutely.
I would assume that maybe in the works there could be some type of event.
The
reason I'm saying this is because I would like to invite myself before you even think about it.
if we do an event, you're going to be there.
So you're gonna be there. That's all I ask. I genuinely appreciate your time. I think this is one of many conversations I'd like to have with you, because I think there's still so much more that I'd like to pick your brain on and dissect more in yourself too, being an entrepreneur with a magazine, and even just more wine. And like you said, just food and wine is good. And maybe next year we can do this again with some pakora or some actual food here, so we can also have a little bit more fun as we do this.
Absolutely. No, it'd be my pleasure.
So I appreciate your time again. This has been another episode of the Brown Ballers podcast. If you don't already know, Quench magazine right here. I'm going to point it right to this camera here. Quenchmagazine.com.
Quench.me.
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 And the Instagram.
Something. I don't know.
You're going to go to Quench.me. You're going to get the Instagram here. But most importantly, just check it out. If you're a wine, if you're like me, a young individual, I call myself young, a young individual still getting into wine. This is the guy to know, and this is the brand and magazine to follow to learn more about it. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.